I researched how Fred VanVleet's current season matches up to the all-time great playmaking seasons in NBA history, and the results are going to shock you. This season, Fred VanVleet has been referred to as many different things, from shot chucker to selfish to shoot first point guard. So I wanted to go deeper in on these statistics to prove if these things were true or if they were not. Because the notion that I've been developing over the course of the season is that Fred VanVleet is not these things, that he's a great point guard and he's well worth an investment from the Raptors to keep beyond this season. And though just from watching that, I have developed this sort of opinion, many have this conflicting opinion that he's not the point guard that suits the Raptors for a very long term. And for a while during the season, maybe I felt like he wasn't the right point guard from a long-term standpoint for this Toronto Raptors team. That has certainly changed in the recent months and has certainly changed over the course of this season. And maybe some of these stats I'm going to highlight in this video, specifically 3 that I am going to cover, are going to help you form an assessment about the player that is even more educated than previously. And maybe this will change your opinion on exactly what sort of a player Fred VanVleet is and what he can be for the Raptors over the course of a long-term period. When the Raptors acquired Jakob Poeltl at the 2023 NBA trade deadline, it was clear that he was a great fit for the team just because of his own qualities as a player in terms of his rim protecting on defense and the offensive presence and size he can bring to the glass on the offensive end for the team. But it also stretches to the teammates and how he's going to affect other players in the team. Jakob Poeltl doesn't space the floor from his shooting, but he does space the floor because of his screen setting, because of his playmaking from the high post, and that's been very apparent so far in his very brief return to the Raptors. But what we have definitely learned from this situation is that he has heightened Fred VanVleet's game, and that it seems no other player on the Raptors has profited more from the Jakob Poeltl trade than Fred VanVleet himself for a variety of reasons. Question marks have been made by Fred VanVleet's ability to be a point guard and a playmaker. Long have I thought that Fred VanVleet is a shooting guard trapped in a point guard's body. Therefore, he's kind of been shoehorned into that sort of role because his size allows him to be a point guard, but his traits have largely catered towards a shooting guard. But as time has gone on and Fred VanVleet has been the starting point guard for this team, and oftentimes the only point guard for this team, he's developed more and more into a proper playmaker and a proper passer. When he was thrown into that role after the departure of Kyle Lowry, certainly I had my questions about what he could do in this specific role in terms of his playmaking and setting up his teammates. And a lot of those questions have been answered this season, and if they haven't been answered for you yet, well, they should have been answered after the trade deadline, because Jakob Poeltl and Fred VanVleet form a formidable pick-and-roll partnership. The modern NBA thrives off of the pick-and-roll, so it's not a negative for a team to go to that very often, and it's also very much not a negative for your point guard to thrive in those situations. Like I said, the NBA operates off of pick-and-roll sets in 2023. So if your point guard is good at running the pick-and-roll and your big is good at running the pick-and-roll, well, that's only going to lead to success for your offense. And I've noticed that where the Raptors struggle to find success in some certain games, it comes down to maybe they're not running the pick and roll as often as they should be. And to prove this a little bit further, we have some statistics here to showcase how much Fred VanVleet's playmaking prowess has really improved with the acquisition of Jakob Poeltl to this team. Fred VanVleet, since the February 9th trade deadline, has averaged 9 assists per game, which is 6th highest in the league in that span. So 9 assists per game. That's a lot of assists for a player who is selfish, who can't make shots for his other teammates, who can't pass. All of these things that have been derived from Fred VanVleet's game this season. I understand that is a bit of a smaller sample size, and his assists per game on the whole for the season has been a little bit lower. And I still don't believe that a 9 assists per game pace is sustainable for Fred VanVleet over the course of an 82-game season, but it would certainly indicate that, yes, he is a high-quality playmaker, also because in the stretch where he's averaging 9 assists per game, he's also stuffing the stat sheet with points to go along with it. His offensive game has taken a huge leap, and he's been one of the most consistent Raptors for a 4-month span at this point. He's putting together a great season here despite the slow start to it, and these statistics would help indicate that, yes, Fred VanVleet is a good playmaker, and this is something that we can see from him longer term if he is re-signed for next season, especially as we pair him with Jakob Poeltl. But these are very surface level stats for Fred VanVleet in a very short sample size of the season here. They're not very indicative to his game in terms of his playmaking, so I dug a little bit deeper into this. And the reality from my research here is that Fred VanVleet is putting on one of the top 11 seasons of all time as it comes to playmaking in comparison with a player who receives such low usage on the court. People had this misconception that he's such a high usage player, he takes the ball way too much, but cannot be further from the truth. Fred VanVleet is providing one of the 11 seasons in NBA history right now where he's seen an assist percentage above 25%, a turnover percentage under 10%, and also a usage percentage under 25%. Once again, I'm going to reiterate that only 11 of these seasons have ever happened in NBA history, and Fred VanVleet has 2 of these seasons. More specifically, he's putting on these levels this season. He also did this in 2020, 2021, but he's also doing it this season. He's executing at a very high level from a playmaking standpoint. He is not turning over the ball often at all, and he's doing all of this with very low levels of usage. The Raptors are spreading the love. They're spreading the ball. Maybe not quite to the degree that you would be looking for as a fan, but any sort of notion that the ball isn't going around enough, that can't really be pegged on Fred VanVleet for the output that we are seeing from the player, given the fact that he has this usage. If anything, all of these metrics would indicate that he should be getting the ball even more, but I would suggest it's a pretty good level right now where he is getting the bulk of the ball handling on an offense, and there were doubts earlier on in the season for me if Fred VanVleet could be the one who initiates the offense and if he should be the one to run the offense with the ball in his hand primarily, and all of those doubts, all of those questions have really been answered as the season has gone on and the further I've looked into everything. I have to give credit where credit is due, though. A lot of this information was highlighted to me by this specific user on Twitter who really helped me along with the research of this video, so shout out to him, go check him out. More constraints with Fred VanVleet's game have come to his ball retention and the perception that maybe he turns over the ball a little bit too much. And once again, this is just another misconception about the player that is just not accurate in any sense whatsoever, especially this season. So far, Fred VanVleet has an assist to turnover ratio of 3.6, which is good for 11th in the entire NBA. 11th in assist to turnover ratio in the NBA, which is also 9th among point guards. And among those 9 point guards, it is 5th among starting point guards. So for the players seeing the amount of repetitions with the ball in his hands creating offense, also to the degree of being a starting point guard where we can highlight the volume of ball touches even more, Fred VanVleet is top 5 for those starting point guards. But for the NBA as a whole, just to make it a little bit more generous to anybody who is having those doubts, 11th in the league, which is obviously very, very good. Fred VanVleet makes stuff happen for his teammates and very rarely gives possession away to the opposition in the process. That is exactly what you want from your point guard. We're also seeing, compared to the other statistics that I've already highlighted in this video, the assist to turnover ratio being so good for this NBA, while also providing a high amount of assists this season in low usage settings. Fred VanVleet is providing the exact point guard play that the Toronto Raptors need and the exact point guard play that a team in the NBA would want. People like to label the jump shooting as a little bit of a problem for Fred VanVleet, but this is exactly what makes him such an effective point guard. A player who's operating in the pick and roll to such a high usage rate like Fred VanVleet is. We're not seeing crazy high usage, as I've said, but we are seeing the Raptors go to the pick and roll a lot more often right now. And what allows this to be successful is that when Fred VanVleet comes off the screen, well, you can't hedge there. You can't go under the screen because Fred VanVleet's jump shot is so lethal that if you provide him that space, well, he's going to make you pay with that jump shot. This just has the defender playing up on him a little bit more often. When the defender plays up on you more often, that leaves more space on the inside for, let's say, the roll man like Poeltl, for teammates, because you have to compensate for all the additional space that this pick and roll has just provided. That is what has allowed Fred VanVleet to have more space to pick out those passes and average those 9 assists per game since the NBA trade deadline. And that is what has consistently allowed him to be a good point guard for the Raptors. The jump shooting is what makes him a better playmaker. So how can a player displaying such fine statistics and such fine play on the court be so scrutinized by Raptors fans and all over social media. You see a ton of hate for Fred VanVleet. If you go to the comments of a lot of my videos, you see a ton of hate for Fred VanVleet. You know what? Scroll down to the comment section of this current video. You're probably going to see a lot of hate for Fred VanVleet and a lot of hate for myself for even coming through with this sort of topic. But the reality is for Fred VanVleet, he's a good player. But what is easy to pick out for Fred VanVleet is just the fact that, well, he's easy to pick out. I go to the jump shooting, which is very easy to look at for VanVleet, because when it comes to jump shooting, Fred VanVleet, let's say 3-point percentage, he is not going to be averaging likely higher than 40% from a 3-point standpoint, and he certainly isn't doing that this season, but the 3-point shot is one of the most efficient shots in the NBA. You don't need to be shooting above 40% from 3 to make that a good shot. In fact, you can be shooting 35-ish% from 3, and that can still be considered a pretty good 3-point percentage. When you factor in the volume for Fred VanVleet as well, averaging around 10 3-point attempts per game, like I said, the spacing that sort of play provides opens up different avenues for his teammates, and Fred VanVleet himself, from a shooting standpoint, is doing so, maybe not as efficient as we would want, or maybe we would expect from Fred VanVleet compared to different seasons, but it is still good enough to be considered from an analytical perspective a good shot to take. Also, that doesn't factor in just the efficiency, again, the space that it provides for his teammates, making their lives even easier. But like I said, it is easy to pick out Fred VanVleet from a shooting standpoint, from a jump shooting standpoint, because, well, it's very much in the focus as you see the play develop. You don't really see much of the things behind the scenes. Maybe you're focusing on the ball as the play develops. You don't see everything that creates the right shot. But for VanVleet, well, you see everything. He comes off of a screen, or he makes a move and takes a shot. No extra analysis needs to go into that. It's very clear for the eye to see. Going further down the list, Fred VanVleet is just not an efficient player at the rim. This is definitely a problem with his game. He's one of the least efficient players in the league when he is finishing at the rim. This leads to a poor efficiency in general, which people really throw towards his 3-point percentage as well. Like I said, the 3-point percentage is fine, but when you look at the field goal percentage as a whole, it struggles because, well, at the rim, his finishing, where you really make up the bulk of your efficiency, the bulk of your field goal percentage, he's just too small to be effective in those areas. And his game is not crafty enough in those areas to be super effective, though I will say this season, he has toned down the shot volume in those areas quite a bit, and he's made up for a lot of it because he's going to the line more often here, though I will say this is definitely a negative part of his game, finishing at the rim, but it's fixated on too much for the other qualities that he provides on the court. Another thing that is easy to scrutinize for the player is the bailout possessions. A lot of the times I feel like the Raptors in their bailout possessions, 5 seconds left in the shot clock, just need to get a shot up. I feel like a lot of times it's just pass to Fred VanVleet and hope he can create a shot, because there's such a limited amount of shot creators on this team. A lot of times Fred VanVleet could be the only one on the floor, so get the ball to him and pray that he makes a shot. But I will say another negative to his game is the fact that he's a guy a lot of the times who is bailing himself out of that possession and dishing to somebody late in the shot clock. I will say that is a problem for his game. Raptors need to do a better job of creating better shots early on in the shot clock, but maybe Fred VanVleet holds on to the ball a little bit too long some of the possessions. And I'm saying all these great things about Fred VanVleet, but he's not exempt from things that have gone wrong this season. Sometimes Fred VanVleet, when he takes a transition 3 early in the shot clock unnecessarily, when the Raptors have momentum, I want to pull my hair out. That is a significant part of the game that I don't like of his. Sometimes he'll get into a space and just get tunnel vision going to the rim where he shouldn't be. That doesn't happen as often anymore. Nowhere near as much as it happened last season, but it still does happen, and it does happen more than I would want. The bailout possession. Sometimes he has the ball a little bit too long in his hands and tries to bail himself out, give it to a teammate, and pray that that guy hits the shot. That's just another part of his game that is a negative. But Fred VanVleet is not the perfect player, but all of these stats, all of the eye tests, everything we've seen this season would indicate that he is a very good player in the league. So, again, where is this scrutiny coming from? And it's not the first time we've seen this trend from Raptors fans. Long time ago. I mean, Kyle Lowry, before he became the greatest Raptor of all time, winning that championship with the team, he was a scapegoat for the Raptors when things went wrong, especially in the playoffs, though nothing would indicate that that was really on him. We can go to a couple seasons ago, the Tampa season, 2020-2021 season. Pascal Siakam was made the scapegoat for the Raptors when they struggled, and they finished the 7th worst record in the NBA. Siakam wasn't at his best that season, but he certainly had a fine season. But there's always this need in this crowd for some reason for there to be a scapegoat. And because Fred VanVleet, as I've said in this video, is very easy to pick out as that scapegoat, That's what people are fixating on. And it's very clear from the start of the season. I mean, Fred VanVleet came out the gates horribly. He was shooting very poorly, wasn't affecting the game. He was struggling on defense. All of that has improved as the season has gone on, but sometimes we're a little bit too proud to admit things have changed. I change my opinions all the time. I admit when I'm wrong on this channel. The reality is, when new evidence is presented, that evidence factors into my opinion. So start of the season, Fred VanVleet was playing horribly, but as the season has gone on, he's only gotten better and better. He's only gotten more consistent and even more consistent. And as things have gone on, well, now we're seeing Fred VanVleet as a completely different player to what he was earlier on in the season, but people still want to hold on to those sort of beliefs from the start of the season. Maybe it's out of pride. I don't know what it is, but if you've been watching the Raptors all season, you would see the development strides from Fred VanVleet. If you've been watching Fred VanVleet from December onwards, you would have no idea why there's any sort of criticism going on with the player, because he's just been excellent since the middle of December. With all this combined, now the big question becomes, how much exactly is the player worth? This is where some of the criticism does come for the player as well, because he is going to command a lot of money in free agency this season, and people just don't want to pay him. Maybe some people feel the need to put him down as a player because they don't want to be the guys that are paying him in the offseason all of this money. And I've said on Twitter, to a little bit of negative pushback from people, that Fred VanVleet is going to be making $30 million this season, whether you like it or not. And for all the reasons I've gone over in this video, I would want him to be on the Raptors doing that. Fred VanVleet, in the reality of the situation, is not a $30 million player, but he is definitely close to that mark. He's currently making about $21, $22 million, and since then, well, Fred VanVleet's abilities have grown quite a bit since that season where he signed that contract in the middle of the 2020 offseason. He's improved as a player. The NBA salary cap is set to increase and take a big jump, so that's going to be a factor for the player. And there's some certain factors as well from the agency perspective that is just going to increase his value. There's nothing that we can really do about it. So there's the ability of the player that has gone up. There is the fact that the salary cap has increased. Fred VanVleet is probably around a $26, $27, $28 million player. I would say he's worth that sort of range. But then, like I said, the agency things. We have Fred VanVleet's bird rights. So we can pay Fred a little bit more than we can pay somebody else. The bird rights allow you to go a little bit over the cap in order to sign a player that has remained on your team. This incentivizes the team keeping the player, paying him what he's worth, and it also incentivizes the player staying with the team because he can make a little bit of extra money. Knowing he has the power to use his bird rights in this situation, Fred VanVleet will definitely leverage this into the negotiations, because this can have a little bit of a negative effect on the team, because if they can pay Fred VanVleet his bird rights and then go over the salary cap a little bit to keep the player, well, they can get a player of Fred VanVleet's caliber. But if they were to try to find a player in that sort of caliber, in that sort of play range in the open market, well, they would not be able to pay them as much because they don't have that player's bird rights. So this will be a negotiation tool. This will be a leverage tool from Clutch Sports, who Fred VanVleet is now part of, to get him likely to around $30 million. I would say that he's going to be making $30 million plus this season. That is a reality that the Raptors are going to have to face. From what I've seen since the trade deadline, from what I've seen from, Gary Trent, Fred VanVleet, there's questions of if the Raptors are going to pick between these two, who they're going to want to keep. Fred VanVleet's the guy you got to keep. When Gary Trent is hitting shots, he's a very effective player. When he's not hitting shots, well, can't play make, can't rebound, not a good defender. Fred VanVleet, when he's not making shots, he can still be the best player on the court. He's initiating everything on offense, providing defense. He's controlling the game for this team. That's just something not a lot of players can do. And it's just not something the Raptors can replace in the offseason with the talent pool that's going to be available. And again, the money that they're going to be able to allocate to that player. I mean, the Raptors and their history of finding guys in free agency, that's a big risk to take. And Raptors fans would know that better than anybody. So it is very reasonable to suggest that Fred VanVleet is the player that they should be keeping and should keep beyond this season. I'm not saying you shouldn't keep Gary Trent. I think you should keep Trent. I think you should keep VanVleet. And I think you should keep Poeltl as well. It's going to be difficult to do that, but Fred VanVleet is not a player that should be sacrificed here. He's too important to do that, and we've highlighted in this entire video that he's a good player who clearly can score very well, can shoot the ball very well, is the best shooter on the Raptors, the best floor spacer on the Raptors, and he's doing all these things while being an unselfish, high quality playmaker without commanding too much of the ball. There's nothing really here to put him down. There's nothing really here to suggest that he shouldn't be on this team for the long term. Fred VanVleet is a vital component of the Toronto Raptors and should continue to be a vital component of the Raptors beyond this season. What do you guys make of all the statistics in this video? Bit of a long video, a lot to cover, a lot I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you felt about it in the comments down below. Do you think the Raptors should keep Fred VanVleet? Drop a like if you did enjoy this video, and make sure you're subscribed to Amateur Sports for more Raptors content just like this, videos, live streams, shorts, so much great stuff coming to this channel. Help me on the road to 14,000 subs.